Good morning and welcome to the Level Set. I'm here with the full roster this morning. We have Larry Fields, Gerald Christmas, Dr. Charles Alexander, Mike Jones, and myself, Reddit Hudson, here with you. Let's jump right into it, gentlemen. We had historic rainfall here in St. Louis over the past 48 hours. Many communities hit very, very hard. Lives changed. You know, it's really a tragedy in some respects when I see the impact that it had on families around the region. As a matter of fact, I have to get over to our childhood home in University City. I haven't had a chance to get by there yet, but I'm gonna go by there sometime today to, fingers crossed, hopefully see that there was minimal damage or not. But man, Larry, as we talked about before we came on the air, it speaks to a few things, and to you too, Gerald. First of all, record rainfall, historic rainfall. We've never seen before, but we can expect that kind of thing to happen more frequently with global warming being what it is, climate change being what it is. These are the kinds of things that are going to be recurring more and more often. Our infrastructure, such as it is, a sewer system that's probably 100+ years old. The demands on that system are increasingly overwhelming it. Infrastructure work needs to be done everywhere around the country, no different here in St. Louis and throughout the region. But do you all know of anyone who was impacted by the floods or anything like that?
Everyone I know was merely inconvenienced. Fortunately, Larry's familiar where my parents' home is, and my sister lives in Webster Groves, and we happen to live on a hill, and so we did. I think my sister did get some dampness in the basement, but not was not threatened by flooding or whatever. So the dampness again was just a function of how much water is actually in the ground. But the major thoroughfares, all around the area, at some point in time have been flooded. And even last evening, the main thoroughfare that goes through, one of the main thoroughfares that goes through Webster Groves is Kirkham. And there was flash flooding on Kirkham. And it certainly would have been worse if not for Larry, I guess it's been about 5 years now that they've been working on that Deer Creek Greenway, where they widened the creek along that thoroughfare, and so really, Webster probably dodged somewhat of a bullet just because there was some foresight and intentionality about the infrastructure work that's been going on in the community for several years now.
Yeah. Another issue that jumped out about that, though, when I was talking to somebody, is insurance, and how insurance companies are always trying to find a way not to cover you, although you've paid your premium month to month. You'd be amazed at how many people are saying that they were not covered because it was a flash flood. I don't know what the rationale is behind that or the reasoning, but it seems that more and more to me, some of this insurance business is a little scammy. Yeah.
Already, just as a standard practice, floods are not covered in property insurance. Floods have to be an add-on, but for example, if you happen to live in a floodplain, the
flood insurance, right?
Huh?
It's flood insurance. There was a such thing as flood insurance, correct?
The lender will make you get flood insurance. So remember, it's an add-on, and depending on where you are in the floodplain, it can get kind of pricey. And it kind of goes back to one being aware, and a lot of people who actually sell insurance, property casualty insurance, won't mention the flood exemption. So it's literally an exemption to the contract. Okay, the standing contract does not include floods.
Right.
So
but the reason I say that though, Mike, is because I was watching the news yesterday, and the individual who was being interviewed used language such that she expected to have flood insurance for whatever the reason. I think she had paid for that, and that she was told by an insurance company because this was a flash flood. You know, whatever. I don't know what the rationale would have been. That she wasn't going to be covered.
Yeah, I put it like this. There is that I don't know about, and I'm getting way past my area expertise even. But the reality is there is water coverage in property insurance. Like, for example, if your pipes break or something like that, even if the pipes freeze or whatever, I just can say, generally speaking, there's a flood exemption unless you buy the additional coverage. Now, where it goes after that, probably is put like this. That's beyond my ability to even speculate on without saying something that's probably totally wrong.
Okay. Yeah, but the hope is that everybody's all right, everybody's safe. You know, we lost a couple of people in these flash floods, man. Somebody died in there, a couple of people died in their cars. So, you know, continued prayers and hope for the best for those of you who have been impacted. I know that there have been a few resource centers set up. One was in University City, another one in Florence, and there's probably some phone numbers out that are available for you to find additional resources. And so I'm hoping for the best because so many people lost everything, man. You have to refurnish your whole home. That's a heavy lift.
And you know, Reddick, in particular, in University City, a lot of people lost property, and we had loss of life. I know a man was trapped in a vehicle right behind my office there. So, and he subsequently was found dead. So it was a serious event that just happened in the middle of the night, and the timing of it, I think, was critical too. And the fact that there was no way to really warn people, because we went to bed knowing that it was going to rain, but we had no idea it was going to be that much rain and to that level. I remember waking up and looking out maybe about 2 a.m, and I thought how odd the rain looked, because it was not drops coming down. It was just a wall of water, you know, as if somebody was just pouring water down.
Yeah.
And I thought it was unusual. And, you know, and I remember making a mental note about it and then just going back to bed. And then, you know, waking up later and finding out about the devastation that hit the community. And it's always, to me, a race and class issue a lot of times, because, you know, that area, U City, down Vernon, Pennsylvania, all that area down there, all of that is a floodplain down there that runs down by the creek, what we call the creek, which is the River de Pere.
Yeah.
And I don't know if development should really be happening there, because we know it's a known floodplain, and then those are usually smaller houses where people don't have necessarily the extra income to have the insurance that they need, or on that apartment complex that is right there at the creek. A lot of those people did not have apartment insurance. And so, and many cars, you know, many people's cars were flooded. And I personally have liability insurance on my car, and I was thinking I better switch to full coverage, because if I got caught up in that, you know, it just would have been over. I wouldn't have got no recovery on the car.
Yeah, man, it's a rough situation, man, and I'm hoping that everybody finds a way to navigate through it and land on their feet. It's going to take time, I know. So, you know, the best thing we can try to do is be prepared, but it's how do you prepare for something like that? How do you even if we knew it was coming, those people who were in those affected areas, what were they supposed to do?
Right.
You know.
Well,
They
one of the
could have
things
gotten out of the area if they knew it was coming.
Well, yeah,
and gotten
for
some of their
your
belongings.
physical safety, yeah, but as far
Right.
as your home and your cars and those kinds of things,
Because
it's
several
hard.
people had to swim out of their apartments. They showed
Yeah.
them, they had to actually break the window and swim out the apartment.
Mm.
But I think it goes to what Gerald was saying. I mean, I think the preparedness for this is probably not to move into those areas.
Yeah.
And but I think I'm of the belief that one of the things that happens in St. Louis is I think we're totally oblivious to the waterways in St. Louis. I think we pay attention to the Mississippi River, and we don't pay attention to anything else. The rest of those things are just things that have names, and we're not necessarily aware of how St. Louis is situated. St. Louis is surrounded by water. it is literally an island, and so when you have these types of situations, we are vulnerable to these types of things. But yeah, River de Pear, you got Merrimack River, you got the Mississippi River, you got the Missouri River, and then you got all these other tributaries that feed. And so I was speaking about the Deer Creek Greenway. I think if you walk Deer Creek, at some point you're gonna get to the Missouri River, right? And so we're just necessarily vulnerable, and I'm sure that there has been and continues to be development around St. Louis in the same way that it occurs in my favorite place, Texas, where folks buy cheap land and raise all types of huge subdivisions in known floodplains and waterways, and then say come on down, and people come on down not necessarily understanding the risk.
Charles, that was what I was thinking. Our biggest problem is our total ignorance of the larger environment and how we permit development to happen. If we were in a much older time in the 17th, 18th, 19th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, early 19th century, people would pay attention to their environment and say, no, we can't build a cabin here because the river rises and so on. So they were mindful of their ecosystem. And there's an arrogance that comes with capitalism that presumes you can dictate to the environment. And as long as you can make money at it in the short term, the ecological and social consequences of whatever the activity is doesn't matter. So having, in a lot of ways, and America is a classic example of this, we're a chimpanzee with a machine gun. Okay, and that's literally the way we live life. Okay, and don't tell them what we go hit when we start shooting because we ain't got a clue. And we have lived this life, particularly in the 20th century, without a clue. And some of these events can't be helped, but the impact of them get exacerbated based on the ignorance and arrogance of our collective culture in how we live and do business.
Well said. On that note, I think I'm going to go ahead
couple that, and if you couple that with environmental racism, you have a Molotov cocktail, because I mean what you all have stated is that this is an economic issue. You see that the water push were the safety valves were in communities that were not designated as those for the ruling classes. O'Fallon got hit hard. University City got hit hard. East St. Louis got hit hard. a lack of knowledge from our standpoint of what we should be doing in terms of doing our due diligence. Caveat emptor, which is the Latin phrase for buyer beware. But we've been so indoctrinated from the time that we leave the house in this country to trust the system that has been beating us and bludgeoning us over the head since before we were born. We don't even question those things, is what we're saying. So yeah, I think that that's a nice bow on all of what I think you all have put a bow on this whole entire situation.
Agreed. And I want to transition us now to a discussion about some local elections coming up. August 2nd, I believe it is. Correct me if
August
I'm wrong.
the 2nd.
August the 2nd. A lot of races will be decided, primaries, mind you. It's not the general, but important nonetheless. And we encourage everybody to participate and exercise your right to vote. Number of elections, Gerald Christmas coming up here locally. You've got the Congressional 1st District, Cori Bush, Steve Roberts. You've got a Senate race on the Republican side looking like Eric Schmidt and Eric Greitens are the front runners. On the Democratic side, I think it's Trudy Bush and Luke Kutzner. I can't. Yeah,
I think it's Kuntz.
Lucas Kuntz. Yeah, Lucas Kuntz.
Coffee Right. Don't forget about Coffee Right.
Coffee Right. That's right. I'd like to get your thoughts first, Gerald, and then go through the panel just to get your all's feelings about what we're looking at in terms of these candidates and implications for the region.
I think it has serious implications for the region. Really, we have to pay closer attention to the people that we elect to office, and we have to be focused on holding those individuals accountable. We saw the situation that we have gotten ourselves into with our elected officials being indicted in the city of St. Louis. And I think it puts a greater urgency on this race that's coming up. And we critically need our people to participate in the process. I think we have to do a better job of organizing our community and showing our voting power, especially locally. And I think the congressional race and the Senate race, we desperately need Democratic leadership in the Senate that is going to be focusing on issues that are important to us. And we see the Republican representation that we get out of Missouri is not, focusing on the issues that are most affecting Black people in the St. Louis metropolitan area. I watched the January 6th hearings the other day where we saw, one Josh Hawley raising his fist to the protesters as he's walking in the building. And then we see him later running for dear life. And we know the kind of policies that he has been promoting, and we know what we would get from both Greitens and Smith. And we just don't need to see a repeat of that again. And I don't know if we're going to be strong enough to take it in this election, but we have got to put up a strong front, and we have got to fight for these positions. And I agree with Mike on the congressional race that I know he said on weeks ago when we brought this up, I just don't see a Black reason, as he said, for us to vote for Steve Roberts. I just don't.
Do we have any concerns in St. Louis? Before I went out, we were having a conversation about Black candidates being supported by the pro Israel lobby to go against progressive candidates. Are we seeing this? Are we seeing evidence of that in St. Louis Metro?
Yeah, the first congressional race, Democratic primary, is a Exhibit 1 or Exhibit A, whichever Gerald and Larry would call it in court. In that, fundamentally, the support for Roberts comes from a lot of outside support that has issues with a whole host of Cori Bush's political stances. So, and that's what I meant by the reality is the outcome of that race will say more about us as a community than it says about which one of the candidates win, because the winner of that community, of that race, will be a reflection on where the Black community is politically, as far as the way I see it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Doc, to your question, and I overlooked one brother, Terry Wilson is running for a seat on the county council. That election is also primary on Tuesday. And the reason I bring him up, A, is because he's running. I know him, and I think he's actually a good candidate for that spot.
He's running against Willie Days.
Okay. Well, B, there was some issue, and I saw it. He was posting about it. I believe him and Representative Rachel Prouty. There was some issue with some signage that Steve had put that gave the appearance that Terry was endorsing him, and Terry got on and cleared it up pretty quickly. That no, I don't know who put that sign that way, but then he inferred that it had something to do with that PAC that you're referring to, Dr. Alexander, and Steve, and the PAC somehow, maneuvered to make that appear to be what it was, and it wasn't a thing. I agree.
Why don't we clear up for those that are listening to us that didn't hear our show a few weeks ago, what that PAC is, Dr. Alexander, and what their motivation is?
So you have, I think it's the Urban Empowerment PAC, and it is, it's titled in such a way to suggest that it is just about that this is about somehow urban development, so that it necessarily comes with some economic incentive and some socioeconomic and development benefits to the community. But really what it is a PAC that is substantially funded by the American Israeli Policy Association or something like that, and which is a known pro-Israeli entity, and they are that entity is moving around the country and is engaging in local politics, and which will and national politics on behalf of Black candidates who are favorable to Israel at the expense of more progressive candidates. And what they're doing is going after progressive incumbents, and they're flooding those campaigns with money on behalf of the more favorable candidate.
To connect those dots, then that means Cori Bush would be the targeted candidate by that PAC. Yeah.
Yes, and in the articles when we addressed this a few weeks ago, I mean, she was actually named, as likely being a targeted person.
Did Cori vote against the funding of the Iron Dome for the Israelis?
Right, she did.
Okay.
Yeah, and so for anybody who has a progressive stance and speaks up for the Palestinians in that issue, they would get crossways to the PAC that Charles was alluding to. Mm-hmm. What I would throw in here is a situation like this, to me, speaks to the denigration of Black politics, because there was a time in our community that to be a successful Black politician, there was certain white money you couldn't take. Even the worst brother wouldn't take that money because fundamentally it undermined any credibility and standing that you had inside the community, which was critical to having a chance to be successful in an election. And that's because so much of our politics was tied to our social action stuff, and you couldn't compromise the social action stuff and expect to be successful politically. And again, I keep going back to this phrase I kind of invented, but when you create this entrepreneurial political class, and that's literally what you got now, their only consideration is how does it work for me? And we still are trapped in the fallacy, what I call the fallacy of the politician melanin. We assume because they're Black or of color or African American, whichever term of art you want to use, that their politics is in alignment with our collective Black interests. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, you know how old folks, when we were little, you guys even would have heard this too. When you had a new friend, or if a young sister brought home a boyfriend or a new friend, grandmother, big mama, whoever would say, "Who's his people?" And we need to ask that about Black politicians. Who they people? Okay, because just because they look like you don't make them you.
That is the truth. No question about it.
I agree with everything Mike is saying. You know, and I think what's really hard and makes that even more difficult is where we are collectively as a people. Because I think it was a lot easier, as you said, Mike, many times, to know years ago where we were collectively. And it's difficult to figure that out now where we are collectively.
Doc, did you want to weigh in on that?
No, I'm with it. I'm in agreement with what's been said.
Okay. Yeah. And then, you know, looking at other races, Eric Schmidt and Eric Greitens, each one trying to out racist, the other out target minority, the other one. You know, I don't know what's going to happen on that side. What concerns me in all the races, statewide, nationwide, is the effectiveness of Republican gerrymandering and voter suppression. That's never, when I hear political pundits on television discuss these races, that's never factored in as much as I think it should be. It matters, man, that Houston still 4 million voters with one ballot box is that bullshit that Republicans are able to rely on to give them an advantage out of the gate. They follow that up. You know, you got one place to vote for these 4 million, but meanwhile, let us suppress your vote on top of that and make it difficult for you to even engage in that process. That is something that needs to be addressed whenever Democrats regain control in that setting. On the Democrat side, Coffee Wright, Trudy Bush, and Lucas Kuntz, right? It'll be interesting to see how that race unfolds. We'll see. Yeah. January 6th committee is still doing its work. But Larry, I want to come to something else before we come to that, because you brought it up and it's very interesting to me. The GOP, grand old party, the Republicans versus America, versus everybody else. The Republican Party is increasingly vowing to become a Christian nationalist party, read white nationalist party. The appeal that they hold for their base largely lies in their racism. We had a vote recently with the Congress and Senate up there that heavily penalized American veterans who had served over in Iraq. You know, regardless of what we may think about the legitimacy of that war, these were the men and women who were assigned by duty and law to go over there and quote unquote, fight for the country. You know, that's a Republican staple. We support the troops. We support the first responders, wave the flag. If you don't do these things, you're not American. Well, the Republicans voted directly against, and only Republicans, directly against American veterans who had served, not only served over there, but came back harmed and injured. You know, all kinds of cancers based on the exposure to the burn pits that were over there in Iraq and the toxins that were in them. They had an opportunity to give them funding for resources, research, treatment, support, and just didn't do it. They've got footage, Larry, of that punk idiot coward from Texas, Ted Cruz, fist bumping some of his colleagues immediately after they voted against these American veterans. Like, yeah, we did what we needed to do. What the hell is wrong with the GOP, man? What's wrong with them?
Nothing. They are as consistent as the sun rising.
Right.
We have got to come out of this imaginary place where we think that there's this one America. This is very, very clear. There's a ruling class, there are commoners, their servants, and their slaves still exist. This is feudal times. I think they do a very good job of describing that in the book Mike recommended to us a year and a half ago in Sapiens. And the veneer is coming off. They used to use the clergy
Right.
to cover these things up. I forget, Mike would know, the philosopher that stated that one pastor is worth 1,000 soldiers. In terms of what they can do to change, to get get the acts that you want done. And the Republicans have just stated, I mean, this is what it is. We're going to take you back to a feudal period where the ruling class did what the hell we want to do, and you're just subject to it. And soldier be damned. That's what you are. Soldiers used to be viewed in high esteem, but bottom line is, it's like like the old adage that white collar criminals stated that there's no way in the world I can get a jury of my peers because all of my peers are smart enough not to be relegated to jury duty, and that's what the Republicans don't give a damn. They are staunchly about it. I mean, that's why you see everything that they do with this hand. We're going to, regardless of what the elections are, you servants don't wag the dog. We'll tell you what the outcomes of the elections are, no matter what no matter what the votes say. And they're doing the same thing with the economy. They're doing the same thing with the infrastructure. They're doing the same thing with education. So, I mean, they're very, very consistent. We know what we're dealing with at this point, and at some point we got to stop being surprised.
Yeah.
And Larry, I think that's the issue. I'm not sure that we know. So, I mean, the Republican Party, again, it's the Confederacy. So it's the same group of people who convinced a whole bunch of people who ain't have jack doodly squat to fight for slavery at their own expense. It's the same people doing the same thing with the same military. This is the playbook. And then they tell you about being patriotic and support our troops. These same people who stormed the Capitol and beat up the police. That's who they are.
Right.
And we don't know. Obviously, we don't know. We can't know. It can't be that we know and we surprised. So
Charles,
this is a problem.
Yeah, Charles, I was thinking as you were talking, you could cast us and quote well-meaning white folks would all be the perfect for all the old movie buffs out there. All of them would be perfect for the role that Claude Rains played in Casablanca, Captain Renault. He said, "I'm shocked to find out
that gambling's going on."
Okay,
that gambling's
and
going
that's
on.
all they did is it. Okay,
Right. Mike,
Right.
Mike, let me ask you this, Mike, because you know, you have a longer view on these kinds of things historically than we do. But this whole idea of the resurgence of Christian nationalism, if it's ever going anywhere, it may be to Dr. Alexander's point that the veneer is just coming off, or you, Larry, that the veneer is just coming off. It was always there, always there, always there. But now there's less pretense about it. But you got Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, I think we should be Christian nationalists. You got the Mastriano guy in Pennsylvania running for governor, who is openly white supremacist. Where the hell is it going, man, in terms of the viability of the democratic experiment if half the country is invested in that?
The half the country has always been invested in it, really, to your point.
Yeah.
That the notion that this is a God-inspired, providential-inspired country for white people is as old as the country itself. Even Jefferson, Hamilton, the founders who had tendency to be deists and not Christians, still believed in the providential nature of America. And you can trace, and you got to remember, half the people that came here, particularly in the New England area, were all religious bigots. I mean, that's what Puritans were. They were religious bigots that had problems with other religious bigots in England, and they just came to North America so they could create the religious-based society that they want. This is a country, literally one of the few places in recorded European history that actually tried and burned women for being witches. Okay, now this, I mean, they even literally will teach that in grade school. So the reality is, it's our ignorance again of our history, as opposed to the myth narrative of the creation, that keeps us off balance and surprised. So this whole notion of some divinely inspired, I think everybody here has been to the Capitol. Almost nobody ever looks up at that ceiling in Statuary Hall. At the ceiling, there's a painting up there, and literally the painting has George Washington ascending into heaven, and he's sitting with saints. You know, it's an ecclesiastical kind of picture. So this notion that God picked them and gave them America is as old as the country itself. The fact that it wasn't the dominant, the fact that the founders, the literal founders, Jefferson, Hamilton, Madison, and those guys were not religious, because their religious perspective was informed by like 800 years of European history in the Middle Ages and the church. So they saw organized religion, church, as detrimental to a society. And that's why they orchestrated the Constitution the way they did. But that didn't have anything to do with the people that were coming here. And again, you get this creation myth, and then you get actual history. And it's our ignorance of the history that keeps us off balance and surprised.
Yeah.
Well,
Larry,
see, the problem with that, Mike, is that the creation myth and history are merged.
Right.
And they're merged from kindergarten.
Right.
When we get up to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, your whole Pledge of Allegiance is to this foolishness. And if you find yourself swimming upstream against it, you are the only one. I can remember the Jehovah Witnesses that would not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance that went to elementary school with us. And, you know, so, I mean, this indoctrination that we're receiving is brilliant. Now, you go to the main post office in St. Louis City, you will see some of the most abhorrent paintings on murals on those walls. You have slaves that are on their knees being tapped on the head by white folks and you have a judge overseeing them. These are men in court with no shirts on, and these are murals, and that's part of the indoctrination that you get here. So they are rewriting history. They have rewrote religion. This whole notion that Black folks are the descendants of Ham is the biggest lie ever told. The only lie, bigger lie, is that Jesus had anything to do with being an albino or white. So, I mean, this whole indoctrination, this machine is so strong that it's part of individuals' DNA.
But it's really only so strong because we want white folks to accept us. We wouldn't keep getting duped by this if we wasn't trying to be accepted.
Well,
we are
that's
prisoners of war.
Come on, man.
And we need to quit acting like we're gonna arrive. It's not happening.
No.
And that is why we're vulnerable. And so we say these things and then we be happy that we happily send our kids to hostile environments for them to be taught the way that they taught. We do this.
We petition for it.
And be mad when they say no. And so we have to take our relative responsibility for this thing. And so, and so then we ask, so the question is asked, this white Christian nationalism thing. The Klan is a Christian organization. All those white citizens councils are Christian organizations. Pastors have always owned churches. That money that Georgetown gave to the descendants of slaves should have been St. Louis U, because that's who they asked to buy the slaves when they was going broke. They asked St. Louis U to buy those slaves. So the Jesuits, and what is now what's the space where Mike Brown got killed? What do you call that space?
Ferguson.
That is where St. Louis U kept the slaves, and what is now Ferguson. This is what the thing is. We need to quit playing.
Yeah.
No doubt, Dr. Alexander.
There is an urgency around increasing awareness of the circumstances that we live in. I find myself having that conversation from time to time. To your point, Doc, the awareness or lack thereof is remarkable to me on some level. I guess it shouldn't be, but it is. And we can each do our part to try to raise the awareness of people that we touch and the circles that we move in, hopefully concentrically, that expands outward from the point of view.
Really,
go ahead, Mike.
Based on what Charles and Larry literally just said, I want to raise what I think is a fairly serious philosophical, theological question.
Okay.
And that is, as a people, can we afford a religion whose theological basis is you need to love those who don't love you?
Interesting. Can we afford it? Go ahead.
Gandhi asked Thurman that. When Thurman went to visit Gandhi, that's what Gandhi asked him. He said, how are you going to be free and you still practice the oppressor's religion? That's what Gandhi asked Thurman.
So answer the question, Chuck.
No, that's the answer. we can't afford to do it the way they do it. Now
No.
that becomes the thing. We believe in the main. We believe that we are here, we too believe that this is ordained for us to be here. We believe that. We don't believe that we had our own indigenous conceptualization of the creative force. And even those who will say that Christianity, evolved, out of Egypt, don't say so with some understanding how that is really about the philosophical underpinnings of it and not what we call Christianity today. All of the Western religions came out of Egypt, but unless you study it, you don't know how it happened and how it comes to what is manifest today. And so even when people say it, they're not saying it with some understanding or appreciation for the African-centered philosophical underpinning. They're just trying to justify the reason why they continue to practice it. That's a problem. And so we have to understand that this thing is not for us, and the way practice is not by us. You don't need Christianity or Islam or Judaism to believe in the higher power, but we believe you do. And so we go along to get along, and then we get what we get, and then we are surprised, and we wonder why a flood, why we ain't got no Black representation, why our kids don't learn. All of these questions stem from the same problem. All these problems stem from the same question: our orientation. We're not rightly oriented. In fact, the most fundamental form of mental illness, per Joseph Baldwin, Colby Cambone, is psychological misorientation. Our point of reference is West. It's white folks. It's Europe. That's the problem.
And that is as upside down as it gets too. Dr. Alexander did not wake up to play with you all this morning, apparently.
Hey,
he did not wake up
to play
with
time.
You.
Yeah. It's always good to have the full five here this morning.
But I had to. I'm sorry for the wait, but I gave you some time to get the last time straight. I understand, Dr. Alexander. But I'll answer your question too, Mike Jones. You love your haters for. I mean, you love your enemies for one reason, because your haters make you greater. Everybody's not going to tell me the truth about my ignorant ways. Everybody's not going to show me my flaws in my pleadings. But my haters will show me my flaws. And after I'm shown those flaws, I'm going to correct those, and I'm going to bludgeon you with it. But rest assured, the love that I have for you is not the love that I have for for my family or for my brothers. That's a different type of love. I'm not talking about eros. I'm not talking about an agape love. I'm talking about you were here because I need an adversary, and I need an adversary to make me better. And that is your sole reason. That's the only reason I believe you have blood pumping through your veins, to make me better at what I'm doing, and to make me more surgical, and to allow me to kill the entire stance that you build your fragile being on. That's why.
Well, I would say I agree with that. I don't know if I call that love. So we can get an ontological a thing about words later. But Charles was quite eloquent. For me, I simplified to, if you had to choose, or if you could choose, and I think there are two existential or seminal religious holidays in two different religions, and they represent totally different things. Easter and Passover, they both happen about the same time. And my position has always been, should oppressed people pick a religion that has Easter in it, or should they pick a religion that has Passover in it? And I'm not talking about the literal religion so much as the concept, because Passover represents a different presence of God in the world than Easter. Okay, and I've always, my way of saying that is, I think you ought to be looking for Moses and not waiting on Jesus. Okay, and when you get liberated, then you're in a position to worry about being delivered. But our problem right now is liberation, not deliverance. because deliverance happens after you leave here, and I got a problem with here, and I don't want that fixed when I'm gone, okay? Because ultimately, what's going to happen when we leave here is an if-come bet that everybody's making, okay? Because everybody collected it yet that you can talk to. So that, and it goes back to Charles' much more detailed and eloquent way of stating it. It's our fundamental orientation that creates our problem. Not that the problem will go away, but our lack of understanding and inability to deal with it, always being surprised with, is on us. It ain't on them, because it's what you said. They have been who they are ever since we've been here. That's like lions being surprised about hyenas. It can't happen. Okay, it just don't happen. Okay, so we're lions always asking the question, what's wrong with the hyenas? Nothing. They hyenas. Okay, that's what hyenas do. Okay, you're a lion. You're supposed to have a response to them as hyenas, not trying to figure out how to make them something that they're not. Okay, take that up with the Creator. Okay, if that's who He created, that's who they are, and He ought to know what I'm gonna do to them if they get too close. Okay, so that got to be in the plan too. Okay, so I'm not gonna stress myself about that. I just deal with it. And to me, Charles has summed it up. It's us. That is what you said in a different way. All of this is on us. Okay. There's a scene in The Untouchables when Sean Connery is dying and Kevin Costner, after Frank Dennis, and he tells him, what are you prepared to do? That's what the question always comes down to. What are you? He's Al Capone. He ain't gonna change. The question is, what are you prepared to do? And in the moment when Kevin Costner, Elliot Ness could have taken Frank Nitti downstairs to court and locked him up, he threw him off the roof. He said, I'm gonna fix it so I don't never have to have a problem with you again. And fundamentally, what are you prepared to do? That's what it all comes down to. Is that fundamental, more existential question.
And you know what, Mike?
Answer that dictates our fate.
And that's a question that everybody should ask themselves individually. That's a question for us collectively, but that is the question. And that's a question that I would encourage people to ask themselves, man, daily when it comes to our situation. Larry, let me ask you what kind of time we're looking at, man, because there's a couple of things I know we wanted to get to.
We have plenty of time. We haven't heard from JT in a while. We've got plenty of time going through. So,
JT, let me throw this at you because I'm going to switch the gears a little bit, man. We were talking a little bit before the show about a particular player in the National Football League, Kyler Murray, young quarterback out of Arizona. Pretty good. Just signed a heavy contract, man. I forget what the dollar amount is, but it's one of the more, one of the richer contracts in the sport. But with that contract came conditions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the contract included stipulations that in order for you to receive the monies in this contract, you have to, among other things, watch game film 4 hours each week. Not be playing video games or watching TV while you watch the game film. You have to not eat any candy before your supper. You have to be in bed by 8:30. You need to get to kindergarten on time. I don't want any bad reports from your teacher, or you don't get this money in this contract. Gerald Christmas, weigh in, man. I know we shouldn't be defending the millionaire. I got it. I know. And Dr. Alexander, I know if he ain't watching film, they need to make sure he's watching film. But still, as an athlete, somehow the patriarchal undertone of it, I don't know, man. Weigh in, man. Anybody weigh in.
Wait a minute. The brother had a response.
He read the contract before he signed it. And the team asked him to go over the
He had the
material.
TV on in the
that they give
background.
him.
That's not fair. He had the TV on in the background when he read the contract. That's not fair, Jerry.
Well, his agent read the contract, and they have a right to put in the contract what they think is going to be beneficial for them. And if he has a problem with it, then that's where the negotiation happens. But I think they have a right to put that in the contract if they think that's an issue, that he's not studying the material. And they don't just say film, they ask him to study the material that they give him at least 4 hours out of the week. And I don't think that's asking too much. You know, you enter into an employment contract, Larry, you know, with your as an employee with your employer, and you're required to go over the material that they give you for the job. That's not that unusual.
But brother, he had a response. He had a press conference yesterday. And he actually said, you know, and he almost never talks, but he had this press conference, and he said, in a lot of ways, it's even he alluded to the clause. He said, but it's rather ridiculous to think that anybody could be at this level and perform and win a Heisman Trophy that doesn't prepare for the job, particularly when they 5 feet 10 inches tall. Okay, so what he was saying is that given the success that I've had and given the physical dimensions that I bring to this, you know, in the sense that I'm not bigger, stronger, athletically overwhelming anybody, literally the only way I can perform at this level, compete at this level and perform at this skill level is to prepare. So it's all, and at that, I agree with you, Gerald. If he didn't want it in the contract, he could have said something about it before he signed it. If you signed it and you were informed and you had representation, then you ain't got no bitch coming now. But the reality is they want a quarterback that they got to tell that too. So I'm kind of agreeing with, how do you get to the NFL as a quarterback, the most cerebral of the positions, without being a student of the game and the position? So it's almost contradictory and kind of ludicrous on everybody's part. Him for signing it, them for proposing it, and it got to be something else going on than the issue that we're looking at.
And how did it get leaked?
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the team that leaked it.
The team leaked it?
What it was not in his advantage to leak it at all. And I don't think they were paying that close attention to it. I think it's the team that leaked that.
Yeah.
Well, according to NFL.com, it's been removed.
Even before
no longer.
they signed the contract, they started talking about his leadership issues. You know, that was the first thing they brought up. All of a sudden, they brought up issues around his leadership and said that other players had commented on it too, but you couldn't get any players on the record to say that. But they started that early on in trying to diminish his money, trying to talk about his ability to be a leader in the locker room.
But they do that all the time. And again, 6 years ago, Negroes was telling me they were gonna never watch football again. So I don't care. And so as we started before, I'm not about to sit around here and lobby for Kyler Murray. One thing I know about Kyler Murray is his father was an outstanding college football player, and his uncle was an outstanding professional baseball player for San Francisco. He been okay for a long time. So
hold on,
is
Eddie Murray his uncle?
No, brother that played center for, I think it was I'll
Don't
get,
matter.
think his
Yeah,
name's Reggie Murray or something.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but again, but how do we get to this point? Robert Griffin was terrible. Outstanding athlete, terrible NFL quarterback. Just the facts. You can't keep running, sprint draws and all that kind of stuff. Terrible quarterback. Mike Vick, if he was sitting here today, would tell you the difference between him and all of these guys now that are in the league is that he didn't study. That these things happen. And so the fact that they put that in there, that's fine. But if we really got a problem with the NFL, let's do with the NFL what we need to do with Christianity. Quit. We want it both ways. We said that the NFL is a racist place, and Colin Kaepernick should be in the league, and and it's racism and blah 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 blah. And then we surprised that they say that this brother don't have good leadership skills. They do this every time a black quarterback is up for contract. Mm-hmm. They do this to Russell Wilson. This guy ain't better than Russell Wilson. They say the same thing about Russell. They said Russell Wilson wasn't a good quarterback. He had the Legion of Boom. That's what they said. And so ain't none of this new. Why do we keep acting like it's new? Except for we want to be all in. We gotta, this is another one of those points. 2 years ago or a year ago, everybody was riding with Deshaun Watson. The brother got a problem. The two are not mutually exclusive. Racism can exist and he got a problem. Yeah. Racism can exist and Kyler Murray don't study. Let's quit.
But the issue came up with Deshaun Watson when he was asking to be traded also. Because there was no mention of any of this until he decided he didn't want to play in Houston anymore.
And that's fine, but why do we know? Why were they able to leak it? Because the team was complicit with it. They provided the security detail that allowed him to move around and do what he was doing. Let's quit playing.
And that's a whole nother show right there, man. Some of the issues that we see with Deshaun Watsons and those standards. That's a whole nother show.
I think we have to go a little deeper into that.
That's a deep conversation right there.
My point is that we can't have it both ways.
Right. No, I take your point.
I take your point. With the NFL in particular. We can't say I'm gonna boycott the NFL and then say roll tide. We are crazy.
I take your point.
I'm not gonna watch the NFL and then watch the Confederacy every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. We are crazy. That same Confederacy funds Donald Trump and the rest. I mean, it's all one thing. We keep acting like it's many things. This is one fight on many different levels.
The interconnectedness of it all. Yeah. Larry, I think we're getting close. I know I'm going to have to wrap here in a minute, but I've enjoyed this discussion, man. I know we wanted to also touch on the January 6th committee stuff, but I don't know that we have time to go in that direction.
There'll always be next week for January 6th. Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, any closing thoughts from this esteemed panel, man? It's so great to have a full roster on, man. I don't know what to do. I'm just I'm like a fan enjoying the conversation. Any closing comments from anybody?
I'll go real quick. Vote. And make sure that we get Dr. Alexander up to come in next week and follow up on these assignments that he's given us.
All right, Gerald.
I'll weigh in too, and I think it's difficult as Dr. Alexander said for us to have it both ways, but we have got to be bigger advocates for our way of thinking, and we're not advocating enough our positions, and we're not being strategic enough. And one of the quotes from Dr. King was that you start dying the day that you become silent about things that matter. And I just think we're too silent about things that matter.
Well said, man.
Amen.
Dr. Alexander, Dr. Alexander, I'm coming to you, and then Mike, I'm coming to you last.
So in St. Louis, don't just vote, read and then vote.
There you go. Mike?
No, I think it's all been said very well. I'll just put an exclamation point on it, period.
Yeah. Hey, ditto from me. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us here on The Level Set. We're here every week, and we expect you to be here with us. Come on back. We'll see you.